Humans, specifically human storytellers, are still the driving force between what is real and what is meaningful. It doesn't matter what medium, what platform, where you tell your story. A good story is still a good story, and you need humans to guide that storyline.
In this episode of The Narrative, I spoke with Candy Cheng. Candy has spent years inside newsrooms at Bloomberg and CNBC, watching hundreds of founders learning how to tell their story in real time.
I have worked in the industry long enough to know the great storytellers before they were great storytellers.
Today, she leads content identity at Kleiner Perkins, working closely with founders at the earliest stages.
You'll be surprised, there's so many people who write things and saved in drafts forever. The hardest thing isn't quality. Most important thing is to get started.
We spoke about what she's learned along the way and why storytelling went from a nice to have to something every founder is expected to do. Okay, here's Candy. All right. Candy, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I think as a starter, maybe we can just get into your backstory a little bit leading up to Kleiner Perkins, and we can then kind of use that as a starting point for the other themes we plan to cover.
Yeah, for sure. So before venture, I used to be a journalist, mostly in broadcast news. I spent most of my career in newsrooms at CNBC and at Bloomberg. Created a show called Bloomberg Technology. It used to be called Bloomberg West, but the name has changed over the years. And I also spent some time as a print reporter and correspondent covering startups and venture capital. Wrote stories ranging from launch stories to covering IPOs for tech companies and also business we cover stories. So it's been fun. I left the world of journalism about 4 years ago. It's amazing that time has kind of flown by. And initially joined a C stage firm called Initialized Capital, which was where you first discovered my work. Working with Gary Tan there on his YouTube channel and with founders there on storytelling. And then got really excited when the opportunity at Kleiner Perkins opened up. And now I'm here as head of content identity, working with founders in a very similar capacity.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to kind of understand like how your perspective on storytelling has changed over the years, right? Because I think like when you were initialized, and even kind of before that, I think this idea of like investing time and resources into storytelling, into branding, was a fairly new thing. I think it required a lot of convincing. I know there were like many conversations that were happening around like why VC should do this, and marketing was kind of reserved for companies. Um, so yeah, I'm curious like what those early days looked like, and yeah, like how you think your perspective has changed over time as well.
Yeah, for sure. So this moment in time in storytelling reminds me of there was a transition moment in newsrooms when newsrooms were moving from analog to digital. And I was especially there during that transition in broadcast news when everyone was trying to figure out digital. So I remember even I went to Columbia University for journalism and had to pick a major. And I didn't pick broadcast, but there was this new major. They called it new media. Now, new media has a new meaning now, but new
Of
media
course,
was
yeah.
the major. And they called it new media because they didn't really know what to call it. Right. And so we were learning things like how to blog, how to use Flash, and how to like send out a tweet and why a tweet was even important if you're a journalist. And so it's been incredible. And I've been very fortunate to have this front row seat to startups in Silicon Valley. And when we decided to launch the show, so initially Bloomberg Tech was called Bloomberg West. And we launched a show in 2011. That was 15 years ago. And there's a funny story on why it was called Bloomberg West. And so we were in New York City. I still lived in New York at that time. We're sitting around this big conference room, a bunch of New York executives. And one of the executives, his name is Andy Lack, he's very famous. He said, where's California? And we were like, well, it's lots of New York. So anyways, the name of the show stuck and eventually turned it to tech because we were like, this doesn't make any sense now. We're in Silicon Valley. And so that show was really a unique show because we were the only show in town, and we were trying to tell startup stories about companies that no one in the world knew about. And so, um, early days, I remember getting that first email from Airbnb, and we were like, "What is this?" And I remember debating with the producers, like, "Should we? Is this legitimate? Like, do we have this guy on, this Brian Chesky guy on? Like, is this a company that?" Like that we're gonna regret having on the show later on. But we took so many bets on these like early, I mean, they like now if we think about it, it's like crazy. You get this pitch, it's like, oh, let strangers come stay in your house, or like get in this car with a stranger and drive down the Embarcadero, which we did. Like we sent Emily Cheng in her first Uber down the Embarcadero.
Wow, that's awesome.
And there's so many of these like first stories, like we're all learning technology at the same time, all learning how to tell good stories. And like also it was like looking back and reflecting back, it was the very first encounter with who we know today as the best storytellers in Silicon Valley. So Brian Chesky, Tony from DoorDash, like all of these great entrepreneurs were just starting their companies and learning how to storytell. And oftentimes their very first stop to like being a public CEO was Bloomberg Technology. And they came on the show and told their stories. And so being able to produce the show, with Emily, who I love, was such a joy and also just like such a unique moment in time because we were the only people in town doing this for work, right? And this was 15 years before what we know today as startup stories and storytelling.
No, no, that's really fascinating to hear. I think, like, was that like a hard transition, taking some of that attitude and bringing it to venture capital, right? Like, it's always an experience when you bring like media workflows into organizations that probably are not used to the cadence, the just the seriousness with which content is taken, right, in the media business, because that is literally the product. Versus when you come in house and okay, yeah, it's like complementary to the actual thing that one is selling, right? Or so yeah, I'm just curious, like when you brought like that kind of intensity to venture, um, how do folks react? I mean, internally, and then obviously, what happened externally?
Yeah, so I think I was very lucky and intentional about joining Initialized Capital because Gary Tan is a believer in this work, right? Like he's probably besides us like the one person I know who cares more about gear and the equipment and everything else,
Totally,
right? He has
his
all of
gear
his
is
own.
top notch. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And so I think that if you ask me like, what are the reasons that you left journalism, it's because I knew I was going to a place where the validation from the top was there, right? Like he knew the work was important and that the power of storytelling was going to make a material impact on the founders and companies at that time. And so I think taking, I mean, that this was, so we're not talking about 4 years ago, and now it's almost become status quo. Like you have to have a good storyteller. You have to, like you look at your LinkedIn feed, everyone has an amazing launch video that's like shot cinematically. And so I think it's now become normalized. But yeah, it did take some work in the beginning to kind of prove that this work is important, and that it's needed, and not just needed, but also um, it is something that will materially change the outcome of some of these companies. And so I think that, yeah, like it's a very exciting time to be a storyteller, to be a content creator, to be a producer, because finally our time has come. And like, even the Wall Street Journal posted this article that kind of went viral at the end of last year that validated a lot of the work as AI becomes more commercialized. The need for human storytellers and the work that we do is becoming more and more important.
For sure, for sure. A question on that: do you think like folks can be convinced? As in, there's this view amongst marketing people or storytellers that okay, there are some organizations where the importance of content is extremely pervasive. It comes from the founders directly. They know how important it is, and the marketing team and the storytellers kind of run the show in terms of like they have autonomy to run with ideas and stuff like that. And then there are other orgs where maybe the founders are not like I think at this point, like, today in 2026, I think everyone knows it's important. Like everyone acknowledges it. But when it comes to like the day-to-day grind of actually creating, recording, scheduling, publishing, I think like a lot of things slip through the cracks. I mean, you mentioned like launch videos as well. I think that's like a perfect example, right, where everyone's like super okay dropping a lot of cash on a very flashy launch video, extremely highly produced. But then that's like one moment, right? Like what comes afterwards is like the day-to-day kind of content creation flywheel. And yeah, I'm curious, like, if you've seen like yeah, what you see across companies that you've worked with, and other companies as well outside of Kleiner Perkins portfolio. Like, can that culture be inculcated, like, of content creation, and this is like extremely important?
Yeah, I think that like the first answer to that is like you have to have buy-in from the top. For the very top, like the CEO at the CEO level and managing partner level, like you have to have buy-in from the top that this is important work. Because otherwise, it's just not going to get approved. Like people always get sticker shock when they see how much production actually costs. Or they say, oh, it takes too much time. Like I've heard before, like, Candy, can you make it lower quality? Can you just shoot with your iPhone? Things like that. And so like I think at the very top, you have to have a believer. And, the reason I'm at KP is because we have strong conviction from the top that this is important work, that, we want to partner with founders who want to make history. In order to make history, they need a good story, right? Like we invested in companies like Google and Amazon, and they didn't get there by accident. Like they're amazing companies, but also amazing founders who are great storytellers. And so a lot of the work that I do here is working, especially with earlier stage founders on the very beginning parts of shaping your narrative. So, working with them on messaging and positioning, and then like fine tuning that over time until their launch moment, when they are able to articulate that message to the world. But then also like that work doesn't stop at launch. Like, 10 years ago, maybe it was acceptable to like get placed in a TechCrunch article and then like be like, okay, I'm done. But like what I always emphasize with our founders and especially is don't think about your launch moment as that like, okay, 6 a.m. TechCrunch article goes out, we're done. But like, what are you gonna do? What piece of content are you gonna drop at 7, at 8, at 9? And then what are you doing for the rest of the week, for the rest of the month, right? And so, one of the ways that I've helped is we launched a content studio at the end of last year. That it's something that we offer to the founders as a way to kind of extend the lifeline of their messaging and their launch moment, so that it creates um, content that can compound over time and really be on the journey with them. So, it's not just a lot. Like you have to also think about customers. You also have to think about sales. You also have to think about like how do you land the next best engineer, right? So recruitment as well. And so all of our stories and the things that we offer help in some ways with one of those aspects. And it's something that I think all founders need to think about, stories that can translate over time across all different platforms. It's not just like one and done. But yeah, you have to think broader.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Do you have any like thoughts on format? Like, I know, like, at least like based on what I see online, like I feel like Kleiner Perkins has like an incredible bar for like production quality, and it's pretty consistent. And I'd love to hear more about the content studio as well, and how it works, and stuff for founders. But yeah, just curious to hear like if you have any thoughts on like evolving formats, and if like video is like the format to go for, or do you think there are some other ways founders can experiment with storytelling?
I'm a huge consumer of content. I'm like perpetually online. I'm always checking out what others are doing and trying to build upon how to improve and up our game in improving the standards of what we do. But okay, so my approach to storytelling in terms of content platforms is we really try to meet founders where they're at, and that means we offer something that's high touch, it's concierge, but it's also a very robust program. And the way I think about this in the simplest terms is you're a chef, you're opening a restaurant. You have to create this menu. And you can't like possibly create a menu that'll satisfy every single customer that walks in through the door. But what you can do is create one that you know has the taste and legitimacy that you would want to serve your customers. And then you can like of course a la carte it and customize it for taste and for dietary restrictions, whatever, over time. So that's basically how I think about the content menu. We offer it all. Like here are all your options, but you as a founder can go in and kind of pick like, is your number one need right now customers? Okay, so let's fine tune that message. And it doesn't like maybe it's not a video. Maybe it is something that you need to work on as thought leadership. Maybe it's a social campaign, but there's no one thing that we offer as like, here's a launch plan and this is like the direction that you need. Like we don't believe in providing this like blanket overview because every company, every founder, everybody has a different need.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, like I think there's like some middle ground to be found between what works in a specific vertical, and then what like the founding team is comfortable doing, because I feel like they might be operating in a space where maybe video is extremely effective as a format, but maybe the founders are not comfortable on video, or it just doesn't come naturally to them. For example, it could happen, right? And I think like trying to find some kind of middle ground there. I'm curious if like you come across those situations, and because I'm guessing y'all work with extremely technical founders, and often like marketing is like a secondary thing for them. So I'm just curious to get like your take on how you coach them, and how you kind of again, right, like I think like these are extremely smart people, extremely ambitious people. I think the missing link is like convincing them that this is important, and like you know and yeah, I'm just curious to get your take on the process, and yeah, how the content studio works as well.
Yeah, we work I mean every founder is different that walks in through the door, but I think in general I spend a lot of time because I'm a producer doing the work before they even sit down with lights and cameras. And so we spent a lot of time media coaching them. Like I'm writing their messaging with them, practicing it, before they come on. And so by the time they come on, it's something that they know, but also during our sessions, I also encourage them to record different types of message. So, there is like the launch video and what we do there. But then I also say, okay, now let's think of the same narrative, introduce yourself and your company's mission, but how would you say it to land an engineering, talent, an engineering lead that you kind of recruit? How would you then make the message different for a customer? And then like even beyond that, like how would you say it to your grandmother at Thanksgiving dinner? Because I think that like sharpening your narrative over time means being comfortable enough with your vision and your messaging to be able to like context switch between all of those different audiences and still be able to convey the same message, right? And so we also do that work and like not all of that gets published, but it's great practice. We also say like the recording time is there. So if there's other things you want to record, and a lot of our founders take us up on it. And here's the menu. So like we're doing one next week where it's a founder doing a traditional launch video with our investor, but he's also bringing a customer with him. And we're going to do some fun things with the customers while they're there, right? We might choose some product bureau, while they're there as well, so that they can have some like nice imagery when they go launch. Sometimes we do photo shoots, so there's a lot of different things that's why we created this menu because like the possibilities are endless and not every founder is gonna like some founders will say, can't I don't want to be on video. Like I don't agree with that approach my animation. And, like that could I don't see my face, use my voice, and maybe like I don't even want to use my voice. Like, can you 11 labs like a voice?
Exactly, yeah.
So there's so many different ways that we have to meet founders where they're at and cater that menu to who they are and what their specific need is.
Totally. I love the fact that it's not very like prescriptive in nature. Because yeah, I think like it is like like the follow through just drops, like you cannot like prescribe. So yeah, no, that's cool.
It's also not offensive. Like if it's like you have to do this, this, and this to get a successful launch, like it's gonna fall flat because founders are not themselves and they can't. It's very obvious when they're not themselves and they're not comfortable.
Totally. And it's like, I think like most founders have extremely strong opinions, right? So it's just a matter of like, how do you find the right channel for them to express those opinions, right? So no, that's cool. Um, Switching gears a little bit, like I'm curious to hear your thoughts on just like how to stand out as a founder today, like advice for founders who are kind of struggling to communicate their vision. Obviously there's a lot of talk online about AI and like how there's like so much slop now, and it's like maybe we don't have to go into like specific platforms and what works. I know there's like a lot of talk on LinkedIn and XYZ, but yeah, maybe just like higher level, any thoughts on or any advice for founders who are like kind of struggling to stand out and communicate their vision.
I mean, the best advice, the simplest advice I can give is just get started. Phone a friend. Like there's so many instances when founders or investors come to me and they're like, "We want a podcast, Candy. Right? We want to go be on stage at conferences. We want to be famous." And my feedback is always, "Okay, but are you willing to put in the work?" We just launched a new podcast this week, and it took a lot of time. Like it takes 8 months to get to this point of launch, right? And it's everyone wants a thing because it looks shiny, it looks cool, but the work itself needs to be placed, and dedicated. So I say, the one thing I always tell founders, like, if you really are serious about this, are you willing to carve out at least an hour or two every week on your calendar and carve out that time and save it and have a reoccurring meeting with someone you trust on your team? It could be your chief of staff, it could be someone on your marketing team, and just do QA sessions. Like you have to get comfortable with articulating your thoughts, like record it, transcribe it, um, and then more importantly, like read back or watch back the recording so that you can get comfortable seeing yourself and like reading or watching your words and then fine tuning that. Like, does that sentence make sense? Do I want to refine that? But the hardest thing is just to get started and like blocking. I find that like most people get blocked by just getting started and setting up that appointment or like doing the work, right?
For sure, for sure. But do you have any thoughts on like, like when you say get started, like does that mean, because I think like many founders are a little like trigger shy when it comes to content. Like obviously like your first podcast or your first video is not going to be the best, right? It's not going to be the highest quality. And you've probably seen like some really, like, for example, like I'm sure like other VC firms are looking at Kleiner Perkins and being like, oh, that's amazing. Like we need a podcast. And then they go start a podcast. And obviously it's not the same because I mean, KP has spent like years perfecting this, right? And it takes time to get to a certain quality. So yeah, like I'm curious, like if you're a believer in like just ship it anyway, or are you more of a okay, quality first, or I don't know, like wait before you press the trigger or something like that. Like I'm curious where you stand on that spectrum.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in you deciding your threshold for what is good. So like my bar for good is probably higher than your average person. But if you are a Series A startup and you want to get started, then set your bar for what is good. I'm helping a founder set up a studio in his new office next week, um, and the same questions like you don't need four, 4K cameras and like top of the line equipment if you're just going to like record yourself to camera and edit it yourself, right? Like go buy something more manageable for what you are trying to accomplish. But the more important thing is just get started, just do it. Like you don't have to publish. There's no one saying that like this is your deadline, you have to do something. Like, you don't have to do anything, right? Riverside is such a good tool because you literally can just record yourself saying things and then watch it and decide, like, do I want this? Do I want the public in the world to know this? Or do I just want to delete it? And I think, like, you'll be shocked at how many people that I hear, because I, also work with a lot of um, former journalists who have gone into this industry and do content, but like, there's so many people who write things and it's like saved in drafts forever. There's like multiple drafts of you'll be surprised. Like, everyone has anxiety over articulating their vision, their point of view. Like, it's not easy to be on camera, to see yourself, but the most important thing is to get started. The other advice I would give founders, especially in this moment in time, and this has helped me and my team tremendously, is um go away. Like, literally lock yourself up for 48 hours, no distractions, like, get away. We went to a hotel in Sonoma and locked ourselves up for 48 hours to learn all the AI tools. And it was game changing because there was this moment in time around the fall of last year when I was starting to get, like, really overwhelmed. And that feeling of overwhelmed was like I was doing my day job and I was doing it well. Obviously, like, I produce a weekly podcast. We have all these things going on at KP that we're just, we're grinding, right? But at the same time, I had this like constant awareness that all these tools are becoming available and they were our own portfolio companies, and I didn't know how to use them. And I didn't have time. Like, you need like a time block to really like tinker and learn and put them to use. And so I said to my team, like, I have to go away. Like, I love you all. I gotta go away. And we went to Sonoma, got a conference room for 48 hours. We played with 6 different tools, and the objective of the offsite was to walk away with a product that was generated with AI using the tools that we learned. And we accomplished that. And it was life changing. I highly recommend all teams do this regularly. Just block the time because you're never going to do it if you're like, okay, I have like 2 hours here, 2 hours here, there. Like, it's never going to get done unless you actually dedicate the time to learn.
Totally. Yeah, in that vein, any like tools or workflows that stand out, since you're deep in the content creation world, like I'm sure you have some of your workflows like really dialed down. So I'm
Oh,
curious,
you
like
want
if
me to
any.
spill the secrets? Not a secret. I mean, like, I know multiple teams who have the similar stack. We use Descript, we use Riverside, we use Rev to transcribe. I am a huge proponent of recording, transcribing, all that. Like, if you're having a conversation with me, there's probably a good chance I'll ask to record it because I love hearing people's natural voice and cadence because that helps me understand how they write and how they articulate themselves, and it comes in handy when I need to, formulate a tweet later on or post, or like, yeah, so like I love recording sessions because it gives me a sense of cadence and style and word choices that people tend to use. And then I think like the AI layer on top of that is through the transcripts and the things that I've gathered, like creating AI bots of people that I work closely with so that like the AI also understands kind of some of the cadence and some of you know, the style differences, the linguistic differences in how people speak, so that I can use that as a guide.
I actually love that because like one of the big blockers, especially in venture capital, is getting the GP's comment in a draft, and if you can make like a AI version of the GP, I don't know, based on their previous blog post or something, and like just get it to edit like the first draft, yeah, that'd be awesome. Like less back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, if you can basically nail a close enough version of the voice in the first draft, and yeah, you can avoid a lot of back and forth. And like, it's only going to improve over time. So the other part of it is work. Like, I have to continuously remind myself, and I time block like you have to feed LLMs, continuously so that it,
Totally.
like, learns who you are and how you write. I think, like, my Candy bot is pretty good now where, like, has gotten to know me pretty well and,
Yeah.
like, things I like, things I don't like, words I would never say, and, like, things, so, like, it has learned my style pretty well, but I'm still fine-tuning it every day. I'm probably gonna feed this transcript to it when this publishes so that, you can, like, get to know me even more.
Yeah, no, for sure. One question I wanted to ask you was like, you've worked with a bunch of founders and VCs over the years, right? And I'm curious, like, if you see like a common theme that kind of separates the prolific content creating, storytelling founder type versus someone who's not. Like, or is there, yeah, like not to make this like a very like, like a comparison thing, but yeah, just more like, are there any qualities that kind of stand out or have stood out like over the years that these people tend to have?
Um My answer to this might surprise you, which is like I have worked in the industry long enough to know the great storytellers before they were great storytellers. And so, there are entrepreneurs that have come on Bloomberg Technology who are now like widely credited as being the best storytellers of our time, but I remember a time when they were in the green room nervous to come on TV. And so I think the message I have is like, this is absolutely a craft that can be perfected over time, and you just have to keep doing it. You just have to get started and you have to keep doing it because, it's amazing how, and then now I'm always paying attention to podcast launch. Like, I'm always amazed at people who launched a podcast just a year ago, and now their podcast is getting credited as being one of the best or one of the must, so, Jack Altman's a great example of that. Like, he started podcasts. It's been, yeah, just a little over a year, and he's done an incredible job, and now it's a must-go destination for most founders and investors, right? And so, it, uh it just takes getting started, and, like, anyone who has been in the game long enough will tell you the same thing, like, it's hard, it's a grind, there's many moments where you might wanna give up and just say, like, "Let's just kill the day, like, I don't want I don't wanna do this anymore," but if you really care and you wanna keep doing it, it is so rewarding, and it is a reward that compounds over time, over and over again. It'll open up so many doors for you in the future. It's not just like a podcast guest that comes on the show will unlock new network and relationships and opportunities that so you just have to keep doing it.
For sure. Yeah, I think Jack Altman's pod is like a good example of like how it's not actually extremely high production. He's done the simple things right, right? Like obviously the camera setups and those things are great. And but the clips and everything is not like he hasn't gone crazy with it. And it's a great example of how even simplicity, like I think there's this view that, oh my God, like now we need to do like something extremely high production to attract attention. But yeah, that's just prove that part just proves that, okay, you know what, actually, like even the basics, even the Arcache, for example, like again, very simple distribution format. So that's fascinating. Yeah, actually a niche question maybe, but like, do you have any an intuition into like what makes like a podcast successful? Like now that you've been in the space for a while, like do you see like some hidden signals or something that kind of is a key to podcast success?
You have to define your own success, and this goes back to like your version of what is good. And so like for us at KP, the things that I measure, like, yes, we do care about the views and impression and engagement. All of that is important to us, but it's not the number one thing I check when we publish something. The number one thing I check are the comments and the reshares and the likes and what are people saying, and not just what are people saying, but are the right people that we care about in our network engaging with the piece of content. And so Builders is a podcast that we just launched a sizzle reel for, and the first episode will come out next week. And when the sizzle reel launched, over the 24-hour period, I was just obsessively looking at comments and seeing, like, looking up titles of people. It's like, okay, like, the right companies and the right investors engage with it, because if the answer is yes, then that is to me a win. and that is how I measure my own success. But it's very different. Like if you're a startup, like it could be reaction from your customers, and the other companies might measure the engagement and the metrics and all of that. So it depends on what you value, and you have to have an honest conversation with yourself before launching something. Like, what is the thing that we care about? Like, why are we doing this? Is it just to get famous, or like is there like a strategy behind why? And if the strategy is like we want a wider network, great. But, like, you also have to articulate what that network looks like. Is it a wider network of everyone, or is it a wider network of engineers? So, like, being able to clearly articulate that will help you fine tune not just what your messaging is, but who you reach and, like, what that measure of success looks like to you.
No, that's awesome. I think I love how qualitative it is. I think like the problem sometimes is, like I think like likes and like impressions, these things can just be measured very easily, right? And sometimes things that are easy to measure are often the things that people measure, even though it may not be the case, right? Like where, for example, it's not just the comment count, it's more like, okay, who is talking about this, right? Like, or like who shared this. And that's a little bit of like, yeah, just like augmenting that qualitative data on top of the quantitative data, I think is so important. I think it's just hard to do. Like it's a high effort activity. Like you literally have to do the heavy lifting of like, I mean, I'm sure there's some startup doing this, but like the heavy lifting of like figuring out like, okay, like who are these people? Are they for a startup? Are they in my sales pipeline, for example? Stuff like that. It's just like it's hard work, but yeah, totally. I'm like very aligned with like going and doing that and like defining that kind of yourself.
Yeah, and I always ask founders, like, I usually wait about 6 months after launch, like, "Hey, did that video material make a difference in the future of your company?" I'd love to know if you were able to hire someone with it or if you were able to attract a customer. And so, like, the follow-up is also important to me, but, like, that follow-up does take time. It's not gonna happen overnight, like, you're not gonna like, overnight, you might get some leads, but, like, if it's good content, then that content should, live beyond just that launch week and be utilized for different things. So I think like follow up is also important in like keeping track of did we succeed with this piece of content.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's the tricky thing with like brand marketing is like, like you may get like someone reach out to you like months after you put out the original piece of content, and it's just like, okay, like do we attribute this to that piece of content? Do we attribute it to this new person I hire? Like what do I do, right? So it's always like a very tricky kind of thing to figure out. But no, thank you for sharing that. That's super interesting. Um in that light, like any like other common mistakes you see founders making as they kind of get into storytelling, as they start like this journey, any other common traps or pitfalls that you see um founders making?
Yeah, for sure. The most common pitfall and what I spend a lot of time on because I really am passionate about this is just getting ripped off. So I see, and I help our founders review a lot of contracts from agencies, from video agencies, and just looking over the line item. And I get it; it's really hard. Like if you've never done video production, you don't know the difference between a gaffer and a DP, or like there's so many words on there that are foreign. But I get really frustrated when I see things on a, um a proposal and it's like we need to spend $1,000 flying in this fancy art director to create a set, and my answer is like, well, why? Like we're just using the kind of conference room that's already beautiful. Like why
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
need it? Or like why did you add three gaffers to this when like our conference rooms are rigged with lights already? Like I don't understand why. And my favorite part is when they add in like a line item or hair and makeup, I'm like, but both founders are bald. Like what? Like, why did you just add $200 to the budget, right? And so, um,
Hey, we
prof
need makeup too,
yeah, like there's you don't need $300 worth of makeup, And so
Fair.
I don't know, it's like It's something I am passionate about because I hate seeing people get ripped off, and I know the value of things, right? And so, that's why we created a content studio. That's why we bought our own camera equipment so that we can try to alleviate some of the costs for our founders. But also, like, all right, if you're getting this quote and they're quoting you 10K to rent 3 cameras, like, let's take that 10K out, use KP cameras, and call it a day. And like, some agencies might not be so happy with me, but like I always am looking out for our founders and making sure that they are getting the best deal in town. So that's what I care about.
That's awesome. Any other mistakes that stand out?
um, just giving up, like you see a lot of the like 4 episode podcasts that kind of get released and then they fizzle out and no one talks about it again. Like, don't commit to something if you're not going to give it your all, and don't launch a podcast if you don't have plans beyond 4 episodes.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. There's a lot of that, like just like FOMO driven initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's it, and just like be yourself. Like it's very noticeable. Like we talked about this earlier, but like very noticeable when someone is doing something they're uncomfortable with, and you see it,
Yeah.
you read it. It's very clear when things are. I'm not against ghostwriters. I actually think that they do help some founders, but if you're gonna engage with a ghostwriter, like make sure that you are actually giving them access to you. Like, the worst part is hiring ghostwriter and be like, "I'm too busy to spend time with you, just figure out who I am and write for me."
Yeah.
Like, you actually
Yeah.
have to put in the work to, like, sit down with the ghostwriter for an extended amount of time so that they can learn, so they can create your bot, and,
Totally.
like, learn who
Totally.
you are, because it's always, like, very clear to me when something is written for an executive. I'm like, "He does not sound anything like that in real life, so, like, why would you hire someone to write for you in that way?"
So-
And so,
yeah.
yeah, like, invest the time, but, like, I'm not against, like, any of the shortcuts, but, like, if you really wanna do something, do it well.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. No, that's great, Candy. One concluding question that love asking our guests is any like books or podcasts or any resources that kind of influence or have influenced your approach to storytelling today? Anything you can recommend for listeners?
I love this question. So the one quote that has always guided me throughout my career is from the famous broadcaster Edward R. Murrow. He said this in a speech in 1950s, 58, 57, to the RTNDA, which is like a bunch of radio folks. And it was on the dawn of television when he was trying to educate them on like the power of television. So he said, this instrument can teach, it can illuminate, and yes, it can even inspire, but it can only do so to the extent that humans are determined to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it's nothing but wires and lights in a box. And I've carried this quote with me throughout my entire career in broadcast and now in venture, because I think that it really shows that despite all of the disruptive waves of technology that you and I have been fortunate to witness throughout the decades, humans, specifically human storytellers, are still the driving force between what is real and what is meaningful, right? And so, like, it doesn't matter what medium, what platform, where you tell your story, whether it's a written piece of article, a podcast, like everything we've talked about here, an AI generated video, or like broadcast live on television. Like, a good story is still a good story, and you need humans to guide that storyline. So, anyways, I love that question. That's always been, it's like, I always say I need to have this framed in my office, but it's just something that I try to keep in my mind every day as I do the work, that uh the work we do is important, and otherwise it's just wires and lights in a box and like just a piece of technology, but we are still important.
Totally. Totally. Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. On that note, Candy, thank you so much for taking the time. This is really great. I'm glad we made this happen.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.